Hello, viewers, and hello, video files. Welcome to Wirecast in the Wild, and I'm Greg Kuhnert, and we've got our friend over there in the background, all blurry behind me, Matthew Potter. Thanks for joining, and today we're going to talk about a few topics about Wirecast, as we do each week, and we've got a few discussion points. The first one, API debugging. This is something that people have been looking at in the chat forums a little bit recently. How do you actually work out what it is that's causing a problem? Either talking to Facebook or talking to YouTube or anything. Doesn't matter what you're talking to. If it's a web API, how do you fix it? Second topic, video stuttering. Someone was looking at some problems with video stuttering using Facebook Live. The third one, we're going to have a look at different input types and source types coming into Wirecast. What are the different types of inputs that are supported? What are the tips and tricks and concerns that you may want to take into account when you're using some of those different input sources? And lastly, we're just going to do a quick little live demo on picture-in-picture basics. Someone was asking how to do that and without doing multiple layers. So they want to do it in the one shot. Just a really, really quick tutorial on that. So Matthew, hello and welcome.
Hey, how's it going? Clearly we're doing the update again here for everything. Bit of a quick hiccup there at the beginning with the double chat, but we got that cleared up real quick. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. I'm looking forward to something a little bit later today. For those who are in the droning community that I'm also very much a part of, it's Ken Heron's 100th episode, and I'll give you a little hint. There's a little video clip that I've put together that will be going out on Ken's show a little bit later today that's a little bit special, so I'll leave it at that. What about yourself?
I'm looking forward to it. Me, I've had kind of a bad day today. I was setting the show up today and had my nice Frappuccino today from Starbucks because it's an absolutely amazing day out. And unfortunately, I ended up wearing half of it.
Thus the color of the shirt.
Thus the quick change in not having a general blue shirt. That is absolutely right. Yeah.
Okay,
so,
look.
So we have a bunch of stuff that we want to obviously go through today. First and foremost, obviously starting with the API debugging. And I know you had a lot of stuff to talk about with this, right? But
before I do, let me just quickly comment. If people, non-drone users who are Wirecast users, or even if you're not using Wirecast and you are doing video production, live video production, tell us about what you're doing, how you're doing it, why you're doing it, what's your biggest concerns and challenges. Mention all of that in the chat, and we'll maybe bring some of that up as we go throughout the show today. So getting started, API debugging. So when you're using Wirecast, people don't know a lot of the magic that's happening under the hood, and Wirecast is doing API calls out to YouTube, and it's sending this request, start broadcasting now, for example, a simple message. And another one that might happen later is, show me how many people are live in my Wirecast right now, and display that on the screen as an icon within the Wirecast dashboard. All of those things are happening behind the scenes. And sometimes if something goes wrong, maybe YouTube has changed something and Wirecast doesn't know about it yet, or there's a change in Facebook, doesn't matter what it is, there's something that's not quite right. How do you actually debug it? Well, recently there's been posts on the forums about different topics, and we thought we'd go and do a bit of an explanation of how I personally do debugging. I use a tool called Charles Proxy, and this is something that sits between Wirecast and YouTube. People have heard of proxies many, many times before, but the challenge is that Wirecast is doing SSL encryption, and the Charles Proxy tool is designed to get in the middle of that as well. So it decrypts the traffic on the way through. And the way that it does that, it goes and pulls down a certificate, installs that in your computer, in your operating system, and then that certificate can then get used to decrypt the traffic. Technically speaking, it's called a man-in-the-middle attack, but we're not really attacking. And I do assure you, Charles Proxy, it's quite safe. Don't worry, your computer's not going to explode. So there's a couple of quick little steps. As I said, download and install the program. Install the certificate. Now, the exact process of installing the certificate, I'm not going to talk about here because it will vary from operating system to operating system for a Mac versus a PC, and also you can install it in different browsers and other things as well. follow the directions within the Charles FAQs and website information. There's a lot of videos on how to do that. But once you've got that done, there's a couple of little slides that I've got. Do you want to pull up the first one, Matt? So this one, and I'll just get that on my screen as well. It's a little bit hard to see here. So this one is the SSL proxying setting. So you want to go to this one, and you want to basically say you want to enable SSL proxying and all websites. So put in a star on port 443. And the menu item that you use to get to this, I'm just going to get my notes out in front of me. There we go. So the menu item that you use to get to this, I sent it in an email. What was it?
I believe it's actually under the help. If you go to the help menu and do that.
No, I'm going to look at my sent items in my mailbox because I sent it to you when I sent those photos across. Because, look, essentially, you've got to go to, I think it's the cache menu, not the help menu. Here we go. Yeah, no, proxy and then SSL proxying settings. So that's the menu item that you want to find. So within Charles, go to the proxy menu, SSL proxying settings, and then you will see this screen. Put those things in there. The client certificates and the root certificate. We've talked about certificates before. Follow the directions within the Charles application for doing that. Second thing you want to do, second slide, is you want to set up recording settings. Now, this one is super important. If we can bring that slide up. This one is super important to get it right. If you don't get it right, you will record everything. If you don't put anything in here, you will record everything. And it's often a lot of stuff that you don't want to see. You only want to record, in this case, the Google APIs if you're debugging to YouTube. Now, there will be a different URL for Facebook, so technically you could leave that out initially, record everything, work out which one it is that's talking to Facebook, and then just leave that one in there. So save that in there, add that in, and away you go. And the third slide, this is a sample of the output that's coming from YouTube. Now, this is YouTube querying about a live stream that's in progress. I've blotted out and cleared out some of the information in there that's private keys and all sorts of other stuff from YouTube, but you can see it. What kind of event is it? It's a video list response. You've got one result. You've got one result per page and so on. You've got the ID of the video that's been masked out there. Now, the one thing that you can't see there is the number of people chatting. When I did this particular screenshot, I didn't have anyone chatting. But why is this relevant? When you're debugging that problem with Wirecast and you want to find out why Wirecast is not displaying the number of people in your chat room or watching your stream right there and then, that's when you want to have a look at this, find out what it is that YouTube is saying. Now, one of the frustrating things for me is I tried to replicate that fault that we had on the show last week and I couldn't replicate it. Very, very frustrating. I let a stream go for about an hour and it didn't happen. So we're going to do that again at some point in the near future, replicate that, have a look at that and find out why it is that the number of YouTube viewers watching your stream doesn't come into Wirecast. So Matthew, Charles Proxy is a new tool to you. Does that all make sense? And have you got any thoughts and comments while we're on this topic?
So proxying isn't really new to me, but Charles Proxy is. I'm definitely interested to see what comes out of this. I've got it installed. I haven't configured everything yet, but I am curious to know how many API requests that are being had, especially for that communication back and forth between YouTube and Twitch and other platforms. I'm sure it's been a great value to see a lot of the stuff and be able to help debug. And I know that's something that you've been able to do with Telestream directly. Just saying to them, hey, what's happening with this? Oh, I'm noticing you're pinging the server 3,000 times, or in some cases just 4 or 5, sometimes redundantly.
One of the interesting ones that I have found, when you're actually going and getting a list of links for you to select which live stream you want to stream to in the UI, if you're not doing a manual RTMP configuration. One of the YouTube APIs is very, very slow. And the reason why this is interesting, when you have a look at what Wirecast is actually asking of YouTube, it doesn't necessarily need to have the parameters that it's doing. So it's asking for all of this stuff that's not necessary to stream. If you can simplify that and reduce the communication back to YouTube, you could get rid of most of that delay. And that happens every single time we go into Wirecast, we turn on, we authenticate, and we wait for it to pull down a list of videos and streams, and then you go from live now to upcoming events, and you wait for another 60 seconds, and all of these kind of things. That could be optimized or potentially almost eliminated. So looking forward to seeing some changes on that in the future. So that's the topic of APIs. The second one on our list.
Second one on our list is the video stuttering. Now, I think we've all can attest to video stuttering. In fact, there might have been one just now playing back the video that we have at the top here. But it happens to the best of us. Sometimes it's the fault of the computer that's obviously running the setup. Sometimes it isn't. Obviously, finding which one it is the kicker. And I believe you were going back and forth. Go ahead.
So let me pause, right? So
yep.
you mentioned there was a stutter on, was it bringing in that little tidally bug at the top there?
It was. It doesn't like going on top of my face. No. Essentially, it's a playback file, a playback of a ProRes file. Now, I've been able to do this as a 720p video for doing that. But if I just quickly say, take that away, and if I bring that back, indeed, that does have a bit of a stutter coming in. It's a 720p video, and my CPU is currently sitting at a fairly low rate. It's a known bug. It's being looked at. We're definitely having it taken a look at by Telestream. They are aware of it. Okay.
So let's go back to some of the common things. We've mentioned this last week, I think, some of these, looking at the statistics, check CPU usage, have a look at your RTMP queue, have a look at your frames per second to your destination, all of those three things, having a look at the statistics in Wirecast. The next thing to have a look at, and this is assuming that it is an output problem. Input problems we'll come back to in just a moment. So if it is an output problem and it's affecting the entire frame that you're sending out, CPU, RTMP, frames per second. The last one is having a look at your encoder settings in general to see if there's something that's not compatible with your CDN. So in the case of the person that was asking this question, if you want to bring it up on the screen just for a moment.
Absolutely.
So he was asking about, why am I having problems and stuttering and issues going to Facebook? The next thing to have a look at would be your encoder settings, something Facebook doesn't like. Now, that was some of the theories and questions that I was asking in the forum. And indeed, the update, this has been resolved in the forum. So the user said, at the end of the day, we were doing 1080p. We've gone down to 720p, and there was a post in Facebook, and we've got a link to that I don't know if you can click that one, Matt, that Facebook specifications, yep. Facebook specs say that they only officially support 720p. Well, if you're sending more than 720p and they say we don't like anything more than that, that might be the root cause of the problem. Having said all of that, there are some people who are getting away with 1080p to Facebook, don't know how or why or what specific sub settings they may be using, but people have observed 1080p streams on Facebook, but not something that you should depend on if the specs say you can't do it.
So I can actually attest to this. I have personally streamed 1080p onto Facebook, and how this was done was it was for a brand. A lot of brands are using Facebook as a primary source for regular routine streaming out and interaction. Specifically in my case, it was Adobe. Adobe does streams on a regular basis through a bunch of different platforms, and I know that they have done 1080p streams before. Sometimes it's not available to everybody. It might be a follower thing. There has been no official word, and I do see clearly that the what you're seeing here is that it is max 720p. Now, Facebook's live streaming platform, I find, isn't really the greatest for several reasons. Personal preference of my own, I'm not a big fan of it. It takes a lot of CPU to run on that page, as well as the exploration of it and finding it afterwards. Maybe not the best. And it's something that I'm sure, without a doubt, Facebook is looking at to make a platform that wants to rival YouTube, because it'd be stupid not to have that type of thing.
Let me ask you a brief question. You made a comment that the high CPU, that's when viewing the page.
Correct. Yeah.
To your understanding, have you got any idea why that is? What is it that's happening different when
Decoding
viewing?
It. Yeah,
okay.
Decoding the video. So when you have a playback, and I think this is another point that I want to make onto this topic, is that in the forum, people have been saying, hey, streaming to certain platforms, sometimes my viewers drop off and they'll lose connection, even though I see a perfectly green icon on my end. And it could be just they're streaming out in such a high resolution, at such a frame rate, and to a platform that's high CPU. They have a bunch of tabs open, and you're running a MacBook Air from 4 years ago. That can absolutely drop, and what you're going to have is basically just the buffer build up and then cut.
So what you're saying is the video, either frames per second and or resolution, is being sent out raw to the end user, and there's no live dynamic re-encoding at different resolutions?
In some cases, there is. Now, I know Twitch, for instance, does a re-encode if you're a partner or affiliate or the numbers are low and they have the bandwidth to do that. But in some cases, you want to go source. And when you go source, it takes a lot of CPU in there, and you can see the higher quality. But if you're transcoding, sometimes that transcoding is even too much for a computer if that computer has a bunch of tabs open. If you're having users do this, talk to your users. Ask them, what are you using for a browser? How many background tabs do you have up and running? Right? And if they say, oh yeah, I'm one of those people that have 50 different tabs open, and I've got your window open and 5 other Facebook pages open, that's not really your problem. That's theirs. And the fact that...
I'm going to disagree.
Sure.
The user experience, if you've got that problem using Facebook and you don't have that problem using, say, YouTube, which is encoding and auto down selecting to whatever is the appropriate one for the environment, it's not the user's problem, it's the platform's problem. Facebook needs to work out a better way of doing it.
100%. Absolutely. But this is exactly why, for me, Facebook isn't a good solution right now. And it's only for those people who want to stream to that specifically because they want to have that community. It isn't the best solution for this. The fact that they're asking for 4,000 for 4 megabit connection of a constant bit rate, well, that eliminates probably about 80% of the world right there, because they're not doing transcoding to that video live, because even if it's Facebook, their servers can't handle that transcoding, or at least they're not set up like that. So yeah, and I agree. It's not the user's fault. It's not the person who's streaming's fault, but it is the person who's streaming's fault if they're working for a client, because that's all the client's going to see. Why are people commenting that their stream is dropping? Yeah. Because you're using Facebook.
One last comment from me. This is just my theory anyway. Even though Facebook specs say 720p max and you say you can do 1080, at the end of the day, start low, go to a lower bit rate if you're having problems, and work up until you find something that's working for you in your testing with a number of different test browsers and test configurations that meet the customer's requirements. Make sure the customer's signed off on that and that they're happy with it. If another end user has got a different setup, that's outside of your control. So moving on.
Before we do, I want to, sorry to interrupt on that one. I want to add one last thing to this. So oftentimes, I've discussed in the past, I use a hardware encoder to do my stuff. The hardware encoder, unlike Wirecast and OBS and other tools, doesn't do constant bitrate, because there really isn't a constant bitrate anymore for encoding in H.264. And so things like YouTube show, hey, there's an error, hey, there's a warning when you're streaming out to them. Now, I believe this is because of it's not well known that if you're streaming out just a solid non-moving image with some music in the background, you don't need to be sending 4 megabit connections. But Facebook doesn't know this. YouTube
Yeah.
doesn't know this. And I have had clients come to me, and if anybody out there is watching this and they say, "Oh, I'm streaming and it says there's a huge error, there's a warning for this. What's going on? Why aren't you sending the proper amount?" Well, you're a professional streamer. You know what's happening. You are sending the right amount through, but Facebook has YouTube has a blanket warning out there that basically states, "Hey, you're not really giving us as much information as we think you need to be." But it doesn't know context, right? So pay attention to your stream, always be monitoring your stream, but try to educate your clients and have them be aware of what these types of things are.
Yeah. Can you do me a favor? Can you switch to my computer screen right now?
I absolutely can.
So at the moment, we're looking at what
You're
is
cropping.
sorry?
You're cropping a lot there, but yes.
I'm not cropping. I've just zoomed it to.
Gotcha.
Anyway. What we are looking at is the message coming from YouTube right now. Now, if I refresh that page, because can you take me off the screen as well? Just my computer. Oh, I can't hear you anymore. No, I can't hear you.
Oh, it helps if I unmute myself, which is a issue that I often come into play.
Yeah. What
if
I
I
was
have
trying
a
to
cough.
do.
Yeah.
Yeah, what I was trying to do is just simulate it and make the stream status look bad on my screen, but I can't do that as long as my head's there. And
okay, so let me put just your screen up or just a flat image up first.
Just the background. Yeah, that'll do. Can we get rid of your fuzzy thing?
We absolutely can. We can, but I need to first actually change the audio. So this may come in later as well, where we're talking about how to layer shots, but it was definitely something I had to do here.
Okay. So right now we've got a picture on the screen. I'm going to refresh my computer screen and wait for it to show up as bad. And it might take a little while because we've got that loveliness of YouTube lag and so on.
Yep.
And like all live demos, it doesn't do it when you want it to. It's still showing up good.
Yeah. Nonetheless, I think people have definitely seen this before. It's something that's a very common thing where you start live streaming, you have like a slate up, and what ends up happening...
There we go.
Oh.
Switch to my screen.
Really?
Yeah, really.
And take. Okay, so we're on you.
So at the moment it's showing it's okay, but the stream's current bit rate is lower than the recommended bit rate, et cetera, et cetera. So that happened because we had a picture. So if you're setting this up before your show, before your broadcast, don't expect that it's going to say everything is good. And if your customer is looking at the screen, or if you think they will be, let them know what to expect. I think that's the simple message. So moving on to our next topic, we've got
source types in Wirecast. So kind of a new topic for us to do rather than going back and forth to the forums, is to talk about different types of things associated to Wirecast. And I figured what better way to have an introduction to this type of series than how and what types of content you can get into it.
And what are the pitfalls with some of those types of things, and how do you work around them?
Correct.
So just out of interest, I'm using a slightly different input today myself, and you mentioned USB webcam. It's not exactly a USB webcam that I've got, but it's a USB connected device today. I was previously coming in via a Thunderbolt port, but I recently changed over and I said I wanted to have a play around with this Elgato Camlink is the name of the product, Camlink 4K. Mm-hmm. Why did I want to change from that? The existing device had a maximum setting of, it was 1080i interlaced at 50 frames per second interlaced. And I wanted to go away from that. I also wanted to do some other things. Won't go into that today, but I'm really, really pleased with the results of that, the Elgato Camlink. Really nice USB connected device. And it pulls in a HDMI source, which is connected to a Canon DSLR sending into that. And I think it looks pretty good. But then it goes a WebRTC connection and it might look a bit jittery, but
Your
anyway.
color looks a lot better than it did last week, that's for sure. I don't know if
Yeah.
anybody was around last week. However, we had some interesting lobsters on the show, I guess you'd say.
Rock lobster.
Rock lobster, indeed.
Yeah.
But you're definitely looking a lot cleaner today and a lot more like yourself, so to speak.
Yeah. So the comment, I guess, going back to that first one, USB webcams. If you're using an actual webcam, the quality of the camera is not so good. But if you do want to come in via USB, connecting to a DSLR using its HDMI output is certainly something you should explore. Be careful with a couple of things. I know that Ken Heron, someone that we mentioned before, he uses this method, but his camera sometimes gets hot if left on for an extended period of time and shuts itself down midway through a broadcast, and then he bursts a blood vessel. So
yeah, make sure you
be
have the
careful
right
of that.
camera if you're going to be doing that. Something that's not going to overheat. And while a lot of people out there use Magic Lantern to make their DSLRs into camcorders, that's sometimes not really the best way of doing it because it can definitely overheat.
So Magic Lantern is something that I hadn't heard of, but talk about that briefly for my benefit.
Sure. So I'm going to switch away from you, hoping that the syncing can come back. Thank you for letting us know that the voice isn't sunk really closely there. It's a bit of a thing with Rendezvous. Thank you, Grumpy Vlogger. So the overheating, with Magic Lantern, Canon cameras for a long time have had HDMI out, but they wouldn't allow people to use video recording for more than 20 minutes, and the live view would often just shut down completely. And it was a safety thing as a part of the camera to make sure that the camera doesn't overheat or the sensor doesn't get burned out, and obviously that would then destroy the camera underneath the timeline of what the warranty would be. Along with that, there are also regulations and laws when you bring in electronics into countries like North America or Europe or Canada and US, where there's certain levies and duties associated to camcorders, and they are different than camera like DSLRs and the solid state, different things. So in order to get around that, these companies will put these timers in it and say, no, it's just a camcorder. It's a camera rather than the camcorder. So Magic Lantern is a software that you can get to basically have a custom firmware on that. Now, is that the firmware that you're pulling up on your site there, Greg?
Yeah, I got that there now.
Yeah, so I'm going to pull you up for that. Actually, I can just pull up your computer here.
Yeah.
But basically what ends up happening is the camera itself has a bunch of additional features, including removing the timer on having a recording, or removing the timer on having a live view, or in some cases, the original firmware didn't really allow for a camera to have a clean feed out into HDMI. This software would give them that ability, but it would also void the warranty. So this is a tool that many people use to do that with. If you're unaware, know that it will void your warranty. You are literally replacing the firmware, and this can absolutely damage the camera. Yeah, but depending on the camera model, it might be able to handle it. Please do not take my opinion and install it. However, I do know of a few people that do run it, and they love it, and it works for them.
Yeah, so here's an interesting question, just out of interest for my benefit. I don't have this on my camera. I'm running a Canon EOS camera, and it's letting me have the camera running without timing out and continuing to do HDMI out. What is this going to give me that I don't already have?
So that can give you a bit more functionality. For what your camera does, I don't know what it would be able to do. Now, for my Nikon, I can't do that. And in fact, it doesn't work with Nikons at all. So unfortunately, I can't really speak to that.
Okay. Anyway, look, just something that I hadn't heard of. So interesting to learn some new stuff. Moving on to our next input type. External capture devices, for example, Blackmagic. Do you want to talk in there a little bit?
Sure. I wish I had have pulled them out of the behind my green screen here. Um, Perhaps if I thought of that ahead of time, that would have been good. So Blackmagic for some time has been one of the leaders in capture devices of professional gear. Obviously, it's Blackmagic. They've had this big limitation of doing 1080i or interlaced. Now, a lot of cameras are using this. It's been an industry standard for quite some time. But with the gaming industry out and with broadcast as it is, 1080p or 1080p 30 or 1080p 60 have become an industry standard or a common standard that people are trying to switch to. So what's ending up happening is all of these old Blackmagic devices are still around, but they're kind of making they need to be upgraded and updated for this. Now, the Blackmagic PCIe cards or professional kits that you can put into a computer obviously have been taking leaps and bounds. There's now 8, 12 inputs per card. And I believe there was a bunch of stuff announced at NAB this year for 4 and 8K as well. Now, these types of cards obviously are in a direct competition with some of the new stuff that for gamers have been released over the last couple of years from like Elgato and whatnot, which I believe you're running the one. I'm running an Elgato H60 or 60HS as one of pieces of my kit. But primarily right now I'm using a PCIe in the computer itself.
Just let me pause and say the Elgato Camlink, the one that I mentioned that I'm running, this is really good, in my opinion, for Mac users. The reason why I make that comment, I've read a lot about the device that you mentioned that you're running before, and there were comments saying that driver issues on Mac, steer clear of it, don't touch it. Yeah. And the good thing about the Camlink is there are no drivers. It presents itself as an operating system level webcam.
Yeah, and that's valuable. Doing the research is truly all you could say on this. When I purchased the shuttles, I think you actually own and use a Thunderbolt 3 or Thunderbolt 2 shuttle, correct? That's
correct.
Still
correct.
part of your kit that you use. Mm-hmm. Now, I own one of those as well, and I also own the USB 3 one. They are terrible. And I'm not saying that they don't work. I'm saying that to get them up and running and to get them working that first time and find all the bugs, it was very difficult. And primarily with getting them to work with a computer screen. Because a computer, when you're outputting either from Mac or Windows and understanding how to change it so that it's not 1080i 60, but 1080i 5994 or the PAL equivalent, is a big deal. Because sometimes a computer with the drivers that are built in can't do that. They're going to say, hey, cool, it's 50 or 60 frames a second, interlaced or non-interlaced, but that's technically not what these devices can work with.
Yeah. So let's just finish a little bit here.
Sure.
The Elgato one that I've got, highly recommend it. There's a couple of people just tweaking in the background talking about that and about the sync issue. Let's talk about that. But first, right, so I've got my Elgato. I've got my Canon camera. It's got a built-in microphone going from the Canon camera into the Elgato. And one of the challenges, if I was going directly into Wirecast and not to Rendezvous that I'm doing today, is that audio. It's one of the annoying things in Wirecast. That audio comes in and I can sell it, okay, I want to mix minus it so I don't hear it because I don't want to listen to it in my headphones. I'm using this microphone. Then I want to mute it going to my audience and not going out live. So no problem. Turn off the audio in Wirecast. In fact, let me pull up Wirecast on my screen. If I just add system audio capture. So pretend this was a camera and it had a camera icon there as well. I can turn off the audio there.
Don't forget, you're cropping, don't forget, right? Or
it shouldn't be. Actually, it's the scaling thing.
Yeah, I figured it was something like that.
Let me go and fix that. Scale to fit. Okay, so our audio device over here, we can turn off that We can go
You're
to the...
still scaled. You need to push it live.
Okay, my bad.
There you
go. Okay. So, as I was saying, you can turn off the audio there to prevent this device from going out to your audience. You can go to the USB mixer, and I've got to send that live. So, system audio, which one? This one. So I can mix minus it from me locally. Even when you've done those two things, within Rendezvous, for some reason, it still goes out to your guests because it's sitting here in the USB mixer. If it's in the mixer, it'll go out to your guests via Rendezvous, and there's nothing you can do about it. So the reason why I use the shuttle and not the Elgato for my Osby drone show is within the shuttle, I can reconfigure via the user interface for that and turn off the audio, fade it down to 0, tell it to have the input from the RCA connections and all of this kind of stuff, just so that my Rendezvous guests don't hear echo. That's the fun that I've got to go through. So if I didn't have that problem in Wirecast, I'd definitely be using the cam link.
Interesting. So I just want to jump here. There's a quick question from Grumpy Vlogger here about whether or not we can delay your audio in order to have that sync. Unfortunately, with audio from Rendezvous, you cannot delay audio from Rendezvous.
Really?
Correct. I just verified right now. There's no way of having a delay on the audio from Rendezvous. So I'm sorry, Grumpy Vlogger. I can't. I did just try. My apologies for that. Yep. We'll obviously be sending this, and hopefully some of the Telestream engineers see this. But that might be a feature request that we have to add in there.
Yeah. So what I would do if I was going to try and fix this, and I'm not going to do this now,
is delay from your side.
And the only way to do that, at the moment, the camera is going direct into Rendezvous. The microphone is going direct into Rendezvous. But through whatever digital processing in the computer, it's got a bit of a delay. So how do you fix that? Well, we're going to have to give away a free copy of Wirecast to every person that wants to be a Rendezvous guest so that they can go into Wirecast first, then use the video output and the virtual microphone output into Rendezvous and add the delay. And no, maybe not.
Yeah. At any rate, no, it's something that obviously would be an issue, clearly. Now, I think it actually plays into one of the other things that is coming up as well. So moving along to the next input type, if you want, Rendezvous. Now, I think we're skipping one here. The PCIe capture, kind of similar to the external capture devices, so I'm going to group those together. But Rendezvous, it has its ups, it has its downs. Obviously, it's built into the software. It's very easy to use sometimes, but it does have its downsides. Obviously, we just found by accident that there isn't a way to do something like correct the audio timing for this. And quality. Now, I'm sure everybody here has probably seen the quality level of the two of us standing side by side here, or sitting, I guess, side by side. Greg's coming in with NDI, with Rendezvous quality. I'm coming in as a 1080p signal in directly from a camcorder and a capture device, and I'm able to wear this beautiful mahogany / wine-colored shirt with a bunch of polka dots on it. And from my initial testing, it's not a problem with the camera. With yours, that might have been an issue. You might have seen some artifacting with you. But today you are looking better, admittedly, than you have in the past. Thank you.
I've been to, get some personal appearance and grooming, Anyway, Rendezvous. The quick comment on that is, and I laugh at the comments on our preparation for today. Rendezvous quality is toaster level.
Yep. Yeah, that was the old meme where it's like, oh, this is an amazing animation video that you've done. Did you make it on a toaster?
Look, as you said, though, it is integrated and it's good. And to be honest, you didn't want to use Rendezvous for doing some of this stuff, but I for because I want to find and document the bugs and the problems that are in it so that we can actually work with Telestream to have
And
them
this
fixed.
is one of the reasons that I'm continuing to use it. Now, admittedly, I have seen issues with other platforms that I have also wanted to use, such as, and again, we're going to be talking about this. Actually, we can jump right into it. NDI, Skype, and third-party software, such as one called NeuralNet. Now, I just had a great conversation yesterday with NeuralNet's team, or at least one of the individuals from the team there, about their technology and about how it's used as a broadcaster. It's used as remember. So when you have a radio show, they generally have somebody that you would call into, and they would screen you, and they would put you in a list, and then you would sit there, and then you would join the conversation. So NeuralNet, not sponsored, is developing a system that's essentially designed for that, for vloggers and videocasters, where you can have somebody in a back room and you can say, great, we're connected to your device through WebRTC. We're getting 1080 signal from you. Here's your audio. Here's your video. The quality seems pretty good. They can have a conversation with you back and forth and basically arrange it with you and help you to the point where they can see your devices and they can change and say, instead of having to walk you through how to change your audio input to whatever it is that you should be using, they can do it on their end in this software through WebRTC. The quality was broadcast quality. It was 1080i at the time that I was testing it yesterday. No watermarks, no nothing. Simple interface, but I think simple to the point where it would be difficult for us to use this, primarily because we're a two-person team, right? I could have them call in here. You could have them actually managed on your side, and then I could integrate them into my stream. Like, that's how powerful it is. But the interface itself is not designed towards a one-person shop. It's designed towards having somebody in a booth that is that control person, that is dedicated to doing like audio, video, technical stuff, and the person on air is only talking to the camera.
So we could have Grumpy Vlogger, for example, our mate over there. He could be the receptionist in the waiting room.
Yep, as long as he wears high heels.
Well, he does that anyway.
So it's a great piece of software. I think I'd love to have us test it, and perhaps we might end up doing that.
I tell you what would be really cool is if they actually did something in a partnership arrangement which would auto-create the remote person as a shot, or put them into a placeholder in an existing shot. Because the problem that I have when I'm bringing in guests into my show, this happened literally last week. I'll explain the problem. We've got the music coming up at 5 minutes to the hour. One of the people on my show last week was late, and to go and add some of the audio effects in the USB mixer within Wirecast, you can't add them in until the source is live.
Yeah, that's interesting. So what this does is it actually gives you either SDI out, which then you would do SDI into your streaming box or your controller, as well as it has NDI out. So what you would do is you would say, great, here's NDI out for 1, 2, 3, and 4, right? And then in the software itself, you assign people to it. So you would say, this person next in queue, I'm going to push them over to output 1, right?
Yeah,
and
gotcha.
It does that. It's a constantly on thing for them. Again, super powerful, but it's not meant for that one-person shop. In fact, they're actually developing potentially things that's a standalone box. And it's designed really for that as a standalone rack-mounted system that you would be able to use in a control room.
Yeah. Okay. Look, sounds interesting.
So on that note, the thing that I found with Skype and for this and most NDI sources right now, audio-video syncing as well as the buffer delay. There'd be a huge delay into Wirecast. In fact, it's an interesting one.
Because of the NDI, yeah.
An interesting one. Now, the audio here from you in Rendezvous, it's delayed, right? So the video is after the audio. So this is generally where we'd say delay the audio. The video NDI coming from neural net, the video was before audio, meaning the audio came in after, and there is no fix. You can't correct that.
Yeah.
The only company that has something that you can do with that is TriCaster, because TriCaster gives you the ability to do buffering video and delaying video to match audio. But that's it.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Just a quick word to drone shots. It's on my list. He won a prize in Oz by Drone recently. I've got to send that out to him, and that's on my to-do list. Don't worry, I won't forget. I'm going to jump and skip NDI cameras and converters and go to...
We just did that. Yep.
Well, yeah, indirectly. Screen capture and remote desktop presenter. First comment is don't use remote desktop presenter. Period.
Not anymore. It used to be good. There's other tools now for that. It's much better.
They haven't updated it. They haven't kept it current. It's an old piece of software, and it doesn't work with many of the operating system variants that you may be using. And in fact, very publicly, Telestream tell you don't use remote desktop presenter. They've said that in the forum many times, and use scan converter or something like that to go into NDI, but then you're going to have the NDI delay. So it's a black hole at the moment where something needs to be fixed. But let's talk about screen capture. So screen capture from a full frame monitor absolutely works well, no problems. But capturing from a window instead of a full frame monitor from an application, it chews up CPU. And certainly I get why it does that as a tech guy, understanding what it's doing and resizing and rescaling the image and all of that. I fully understand that. But having said that, I wasn't expecting it to be as bad as it was. That's just me.
I think it's a CPU thing, personally. I've seen really good examples of it, and I've seen really bad examples of it. But keep in mind, and I think we had a conversation about this, when you're doing window capture, that window doesn't have to be the frontmost window. It can be behind a bunch of other windows and multiple things. Yeah. So that's always a valuable thing.
That is definitely valuable, and yeah, you can move it around. And in fact, I was doing it for some testing the other day for something I needed to do. But still, the CPU load from some of that, it's a concern. So if you're running on a system that is, shall we say, a budget hardware environment, don't use window capture.
Yeah. In fact, it's actually more efficient to run it maybe as a secondary display and have it so that is always up, and you do a full window display, a full screen display capture, and crop it. If you can get away with that, it is more efficient.
Yeah. And just out of interest, this is exactly what I do when I'm doing Oz by Drone. So I've got VLC sitting as a playlist on my local large screen, and to the left of it, I've got a separate, really tiny monitor. It's about yay big. I don't need to actually look at the monitor. I don't care about it. It's just where VLC physically plays the video to, which I then screen capture back in. Bought it for $50. I don't need to buy a big screen for $50. It does exactly what I need.
That's awesome. And you know what? There's actually, now that I'm thinking about it, if you're doing it regularly, there are devices that are HDMI signal generators that you plug it into an HDMI, and it just generates a 1080p screen that you have access to. People use it for VR all the time because VR often worked, at least in the first generation, you needed a display to run the games and do everything. So what I ended up doing for a company was we ended up getting tiny little HDMI like dongles that you put into the box, and then you plug in VR, and then you VNC into that box, and you have full control over it without having to have a giant monitor.
Yeah. All good. What are we doing for time? We're probably going to.
We got about 10 minutes left. Yes. So in fact, you know what? Let's go ahead.
Well, if we run out of time, we'll leave the layering thing for next week. We'll put that up the front next week.
Sure.
Let's just jump around to a few. Skype. We mentioned NDI before.
Yeah.
Concerns with Skype at the moment. Number one, the logo thing. You can't do anything about the logo in the corner.
Yeah. The watermark.
Get over it. If you can't have the watermark, then go to something else like a Rendezvous or an alternative. but
Or put a logo
also,
over top of it.
yeah, put your own logo over the top of it. Absolutely. Mono audio. You say the risk of mono audio and variable scaling. Let's talk about mono first. What
Sure.
does it happen all the time, or?
Every time I've been doing it now, I have absolutely seen Skype provides mono audio, the left channel only. Now, it's easy enough to fix. You can very easily convert that to a stereo in Wirecast and other tools. But it's something to be aware of. If you're throwing somebody in really quickly, yeah, double check, make sure their audio is coming in proper. Now, at the beginning of today's show, Rendezvous, even though I said replace your shot with the new Rendezvous session shot, your audio came in double. So it was a bit loud at the first, and anybody who was listening, I apologize for that. But I was able to realize shortly after, it'd be the same thing. You're adding somebody in or replacing a shot, you're going to need to monitor and check that audio first, because it doesn't translate, it doesn't come back over, even if you're replacing an existing one that you have corrected.
And I will say, Ken Heron, we've mentioned a couple of times today, he uses Skype every week, but he cheats. He's using NDI for the video, but he's routing the audio out via his mixer and back in. So,
yep. And that's what I would often do if I was doing any live broadcast. I'd be doing the same thing. Absolutely. Just disabling all the audio out and bringing it in through a mixer so I can control that with sliders.
But the disadvantage of that, if you're using multiple Skype guests, you then don't have individual control of your guests. You can only have a total net Skype.
Which you don't have even with Skype, because the way that it works is the NDI signal on every camera contains the audio of every camera, except for yours. So if you have, for instance, a conversation with 4 or 5 other people, let's say 5 other people.
I'd love to test that with you, because I haven't seen that before.
Absolutely do that. I 100% can absolutely test this. All incoming audio is coming in at the same time and mixed down. Your audio out, because you have a local Skype NDI signal as well as all your guests. That local has your audio only and nobody else's. Everybody else's audio has all of those audio and not yours.
Bites. Okay. I'll take your word for it. We'll play one day. Virtual cameras.
Before we do that, I just want to make sure, because we're talking about Skype. Zoom, Grumpy Vlogger, absolutely I have. Unfortunately, there's no way of getting video out of Zoom other than doing a screen capture. So that is one of those ones where you have to either have a window capture of doing that or have a dedicated screen for it and doing it full screen and then pulling that as the source. But there's no NDI out for that I've seen so far.
And an interesting thing at the moment, Google Hangouts is dying. It's getting turned off. I don't know if people have heard about that. Yeah, they're turning it off.
That's a whole commercial industry. That's a commercial industry that they've been running here, because companies use it for daily meetings and whatnot. Like, it's built into their infrastructure for... I didn't know this. Huh.
Let me go and Google it and pull it up over here.
Well, we've only got some minutes left. That might be something to... Let's post those in the link.
You can pull up my screen. There it is.
I can. That's Wirecast. I'm seeing Wirecast.
Wirecast is frozen then, because screen capture. I've got something else. Okay, Wirecast is frozen on my computer. So no more pretty pictures.
You'll post a link down in the description after the show, obviously.
Just Google it. Google Hangout shutdown. There's in October.
That is bizarre.
Any other really quick inputs that you want to add to the list?
The stock media libraries obviously has been a big thing. That's a way of bringing it in. WebView has been a really big thing. But the one thing missing is interactivity in Wirecast. Really hoping that they get that in shortly.
And audio from the WebView.
Audio is difficult.
I know it's difficult, but it's doable.
Hopefully. Grumpy Vlogger, afterwards, ping us. If you're using NDI with Zoom on vMix, seriously interested in finding out more information on that one, because I've done the research and I hadn't. That must be a new feature, and I appreciate the note on that. A new blue titler obviously is another way, generally through NDI, but you also have a way to do this through new title directly into Wirecast as well. Yeah.
I'm going to ask you your experience of running Title Live on the same computer as your Wirecast host.
Doable, but like I'm running a powerful gaming rig right now, and it kills the machine. So what I'm doing is all of the chat that we're seeing today. It's actually running off of another computer, and we're running everything into NDI on the same network into Wirecast. There is still the lower third. So if we pop you up here, if we pop you up, the lower third that happens below you, that's technically a New Blue standalone title that's built into Wirecast. These are this is you right click on it, new title or live title, it pops it open. So there is still technically something running for title or live standalone. Now, I know that definitely hits the CPU when it does run. And when I do that, there is a delay. When I push take, there's a delay because it has to send the information to that. That has to register it, send it back to Wirecast and say, yep, I'm ready to go. I'm going to do my transition out. And it starts the transition out. So that whole process of that, there's a couple of second delay when I do this. So if I push this button, so I'm going to say take. There's a delay in that coming in, right? And the same thing if you're currently it's stopped right now. There's no movement. There's no the title has stopped. If I have you queued up and I'm going to say take, right? There's a delay in that, and that delay is killing me.
And me too. Just out of interest, at the end of my show, where I'm finished talking and we're getting ready to do the outro music, my wife and my producer presses the button, and I'm sitting there waiting, and then it finally goes.
Yeah, and there's nothing really that we can do about this because there has to be communication. Even in Title or Live, you can still set it to say not auto live, and you have to push buttons. But Wirecast still transmits the information over the channel and says, "Hey, you're now live. Please interact with this."
There's another frustrating one. Just briefly before we get off Title or Live, I have no auto live things in my standard document, my standard template.
Yep.
But for some reason, with Wirecast, I've got a single title shot, and as soon as I send that live, a title goes up.
The chat is the same thing. And do you know the way around this?
What?
Underneath the background that we have behind us is a live shot of the chat. And it's on both variants of the background. One for no audio so that we can play music over top of it, and one with audio for our audio levels. So there is no point where the chat is ever not live. So that's the way that I've cheated the system.
Why do we need workarounds for these things?
Because I don't want to submit a feature request for this. Because if I do, it won't get done, and they're going to take time away from the other things. It's on my list. I'm doing it. I will.
Yeah.
But I don't want to prioritize that when the workaround is so easy.
It's an easy workaround, and I use the same philosophy. I've got many things that I haven't bothered submitting bug reports for because I can work around them. Yeah. If I can't work around them, then I go and belt on someone's door until it gets fixed. The perfect example, the one that I mentioned before, the fact that I'm using the shuttle instead of the Elgato, because I can mute the audio in the shuttle from going out to rendezvous. It's a workaround.
Maybe that would have been synced up though.
No, because the audio still doesn't come from the shuttle.
Yeah, I know. I'm just saying.
Okay, look, we're coming up to bottom of the hour, and that's our 1 hour for today. It's been fun chatting. Let's have a quick look in the chat room, see if there's anything outstanding.
To you, Ken, truly good luck this evening with your show. Obviously, we are all crossing our fingers for that.
Yeah, Ken, 100 shows. It's been awesome. Look, I'll say it very briefly. I've been inspired by the stuff that you do and seeing how easy and effortless it is. Obviously, you've been doing radio for many, many years, doing a morning show. So you've got that the ability to just go and do it. You're used to doing that. Having said that, I've had fun playing with this, and yeah, it's definitely enjoyable and been a learning experience as well, and entertaining. So, bottom of the hour, very much. Thanks for watching. If you've enjoyed today's chat about some wonderful live streaming stuff, give it a thumbs up. Please do come back and tell us next week. I'd love to have more about what you're doing with Wirecast or with other live streaming software, and we can chat about that next week.
Yep.
Thanks for watching.
Stay tuned next week as well. We'll likely be talking about layering and our recommendations on how to layer your document.
Yep, absolutely. Thanks for watching. See you next time. Bye-bye.
Bye.